Now, before you go reaching for that cereal box this morning, I need you to put it down and listen to me for a few minutes. I have been diabetes-free for 102 years, not because I won some genetic lottery, not because I had access to special medicine or expensive programs or any of the things they will try to sell you before the end of this video if you wander over to someone else's channel. Because every single morning of my adult life, I have started the day with foods that work with my body's blood sugar system instead of against it. My name is Martha Rose, 102 years old, sharp as I ever was, still cooking my own meals, still managing my own affairs. The pharmaceutical representatives who visited my doctors over the years with their little brochures about diabetes management medications, those representatives have since moved on to other careers or other destinations entirely. I am still here, still eating the same 3 foods every morning. Make of that what you will. Now let me tell you something that is going to reframe this entire conversation. They have convinced an enormous number of people that blood sugar problems are primarily a genetic issue, that if your parents had diabetes, you are likely to get it, and the best you can do is manage it carefully with the help of medication and regular monitoring. And then they built a multi-billion-dollar industry around that management. The people who built that industry have not, as a group, demonstrated exceptional longevity. I have. Blood sugar dysregulation and the slow, progressive decline in your body's ability to manage the sugar in your blood is driven in overwhelming measure by what you eat and when you eat it, and in what combinations. It is not primarily genetic. It is primarily dietary. And the dietary choices that drive it most powerfully happen at breakfast, the meal that sets your blood sugar pattern for the entire rest of the day. What you eat in the first hour after waking tells your pancreas, your liver, and every cell in your body what kind of day this is going to be. It sets the tone. It establishes the pattern. Get breakfast right, and everything that follows is easier. Get breakfast wrong, and they have sold you every possible wrong breakfast, and you spend the rest of the day chasing stability that never quite arrives. Here are the 3 foods I eat every single morning. Not sometimes. Not when I remember. Every morning. The same 3 foods for the better part of a century. And I am diabetes-free at 102 years old. Food 1. Eggs, whole eggs. Cooked in real fat. Without apology or modification. Now I have addressed the egg situation in previous conversations, and I am going to address it again because it keeps coming up and it keeps being misunderstood. And on the specific question of blood sugar, the egg's role is so important that it deserves its own full examination. They told us eggs were dangerous. The cholesterol, they said. The saturated fat, they said. Eat egg whites if you must, but eliminate the yolk, which is where all the nutrition actually lives. And meanwhile, they were perfectly comfortable recommending a bowl of cornflakes with skim milk and a glass of orange juice as a healthy breakfast alternative, a combination that delivers approximately the same blood sugar impact as sitting down with a bag of sugar and a spoon. The doctors who told their patients to avoid egg yolks and eat cereal for heart health, many of those doctors developed the very conditions they were trying to prevent because the advice was wrong. I ate whole eggs every morning and I'm still here at 102. I am the longest-running clinical trial on this question, and the results are not ambiguous. Here is what eggs do for your blood sugar in plain language. They contain essentially 0 carbohydrate. None. When you eat a food with no carbohydrate, your blood sugar does not rise in response to that food. It stays exactly where it was. That is not a minor thing. That is the entire ballgame at breakfast, when your blood sugar is already at its morning baseline and you have the choice of either maintaining that stability or disrupting it with your first meal. Eggs also contain protein and fat in abundance. And protein specifically triggers something important in the digestive process. When you eat protein at the beginning of a meal, your stomach slows down. The movement of food from the stomach into the small intestine, where sugars are absorbed into the bloodstream, becomes slower and more gradual. The scientists call this effect reduced gastric emptying rate, which in grandma terms means your stomach takes its time, like a careful housekeeper who does not rush, and your bloodstream gets food delivered steadily rather than all at once. That slowness is protective. A slow, steady trickle of glucose into the bloodstream is something your insulin system handles easily. A sudden flood, the kind that comes from eating fast-digesting carbohydrates on an empty stomach, is a crisis your body has to scramble to address. Repeat that crisis every morning for 30 years and your insulin system eventually loses the ability to respond adequately. That is type 2 diabetes, not genetics. Repeated crisis, every morning. I remember the sound of eggs crackling in my mother's cast-iron pan in the early morning, before the sun was fully up. The smell of butter getting warm. The way she would swirl the pan to distribute the heat evenly. She cooked eggs the same way every morning of her life, and she taught me and I taught my children. My oldest daughter, the one still with me, God bless her, she starts every morning with eggs, and she is in her 70s and healthy. Some things get passed down for a reason. 2 eggs, minimum, cooked in butter or olive oil, real fat, not a manufactured spray, not a processed substitute, scrambled soft or fried with the yolk still somewhat runny because I prefer it that way. Salt them properly because properly seasoned food is one of the dignities of a good life. Eat them slowly. Sit down to eat them if you can manage it. That is the foundation of a blood sugar breakfast. Everything else builds from there. Food too. Apple cider vinegar in warm water, drunk before anything else enters the body. Now here is where I expect some of you to raise an eyebrow, and I want to address that eyebrow directly. This is not a trend. This is not something I picked up from a wellness influencer or a morning routine video. Apple cider vinegar in warm water is something my grandmother drank every morning of her adult life, something her mother drank, and something that has been used in traditional medicine across multiple cultures for centuries before anyone coined the phrase functional beverage. I drink a small glass of warm water with a tablespoon of raw apple cider vinegar stirred into it every single morning before I eat anything. Before the eggs, before the tea, before anything. On an empty stomach. First thing, here is what it does, and I am going to explain this carefully because it is genuinely remarkable and because the science is real even though it sounds like folk medicine. Vinegar contains acetic acid. When acetic acid is present in your digestive system before you eat, it does several things that directly protect your blood sugar. First, it slows the activity of the enzymes that break down complex carbohydrates into simple sugars. Slower breakdown means slower absorption. Slower absorption means a gentler rise in blood sugar rather than a spike. Second, and this is the part that the researchers have spent the most time documenting, acetic acid improves what is called insulin sensitivity. That is the phrase scientists use to describe how well your cells respond to insulin's signal. In grandma terms, insulin is the key and your cells are the locks. When your cells are sensitive to insulin, the key works properly. Insulin knocks and the cells open their doors to let blood sugar in. When your cells become resistant to insulin, which is what happens progressively in type 2 diabetes, the locks get stiff, the key stops working well, and sugar builds up in the blood because it has nowhere to go. Apple cider vinegar taken before meals makes the locks work better. It improves how your cells respond to insulin signal. Multiple clinical studies, real ones, peer-reviewed, published in respectable journals, have confirmed that taking vinegar before meals reduces the post-meal blood sugar spike by a meaningful and measurable amount. In people with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, the effect is even more pronounced. My grandmother called it her morning tonic. She said it settled the stomach and woke up the digestion. She did not know about acetic acid or insulin sensitivity. She knew her grandmother had done it and that it made her feel right before breakfast, and that was sufficient. The most important thing about the vinegar is that it must be raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar, the kind with what they call the mother still in it, which just means the beneficial bacteria and enzymes have not been filtered out. That cloudy, stringy-looking substance at the bottom of the bottle is what makes it valuable. The clear, filtered kind that looks pretty on a shelf has had most of the therapeutic benefit removed in the name of appearance. Always dilute it. A tablespoon in at least 8 ounces of warm water. Never drink it straight. It is acidic enough to damage tooth enamel over time if taken undiluted. Drink it through a straw if you're concerned about your teeth, or rinse your mouth with plain water afterward. It does not taste like a reward. I will not pretend otherwise. It tastes sharp and sour and assertive. But most things that are genuinely good for you have a little edge to them. That is how you know they are doing something. The good Lord made apple trees and the vinegar that comes from their fruit. He did not accidentally make something sharp and medicinal. He made it exactly like that because your body needed exactly that. Food 3. Walnuts. A small handful, every morning without exception. Now, this is the one that surprises people the most, because walnuts seem almost too ordinary to belong on a list like this. They are not exotic. They do not require a specialty store. They do not come with a dramatic story about ancient healing traditions in remote mountain villages. They are just walnuts, available at every grocery store, relatively inexpensive, completely unglamorous. And they are one of the most powerful blood sugar protective foods available to a human being. They told us nuts were too high in fat and too high in calories and should be eaten only sparingly if at all. This was part of the same low-fat campaign that damaged public health in so many other ways, and it steered people away from one of the most genuinely protective foods available toward the processed, low-fat products that were causing the very blood sugar problems we were trying to prevent. Every doctor who told patients to avoid nuts and eat low-fat crackers instead, those doctors were giving advice that was precisely backwards. I was eating nuts. I am 102. They are not. Let me tell you what walnuts do for blood sugar, because it is not one thing. It is several things happening simultaneously. First, walnuts contain essentially no net carbohydrate that will raise your blood sugar. They are almost entirely fat and protein, with fiber that further slows any minimal digestive impact. Eating walnuts does not raise your blood sugar, period. Second, the fat in walnuts is predominantly a type of omega-3 fatty acid called alpha-linolenic acid. That is the plant form of the omega-3s that reduce inflammation throughout the body. And here is the connection that most people do not make. Inflammation and blood sugar dysregulation are deeply intertwined. Chronic, low-grade inflammation, the kind that runs silently through the body for years without obvious symptoms, makes your cells less sensitive to insulin. It stiffens those locks I mentioned earlier. Reducing inflammation directly improves blood sugar management. Walnuts reduce inflammation. They do this consistently and measurably. Research has found that people who eat a handful of walnuts daily have lower markers of inflammation in their blood, and lower inflammation correlates directly with better blood sugar control. Third, and this is the part I find most remarkable, walnuts contain a specific combination of compounds that researchers have found appear to directly improve how cells process glucose. Studies on people with pre-diabetes who added walnuts to their diet showed measurable improvements in fasting blood sugar and insulin response. Not through any mysterious mechanism. Because food that reduces inflammation provides healthy fat without carbohydrate and slows digestion through its protein content, does exactly what the body needs it to do. My daddy kept a bowl of walnuts on the kitchen table. Mixed nuts, actually. Walnuts and pecans and whatever else was available, but the walnuts were the dominant presence. He cracked them himself with a nutcracker he had made from a piece of wood, and the sound of that nutcracker in the kitchen is one of the sounds that means home to me, even now. He ate a handful every morning with his breakfast. He was a strong man, a healthy man, and he lived a long life that ended not from disease but from the ordinary wearing out of a body that had been well used. I eat my walnuts whole. A small handful, roughly an ounce, which is about 14 walnut halves, though I have never counted them in my life and I do not intend to start. I eat them alongside my eggs, picking them up between bites. Not before, not after. Because the fat and protein in the walnuts compounds the blood sugar protection already being provided by the eggs, and the combination is more powerful than either alone. You can chop them and put them on your oatmeal if that suits you better. You can eat them in the car on the way to wherever you are going in the morning if that is your situation. The important thing is that they go into your body before or alongside the first carbohydrates you eat in the day, so they are present in your digestive system doing their work when those carbohydrates arrive. The good Lord made the walnut look like a brain on purpose. Or perhaps that is just a coincidence. But the walnut does support brain health through the same anti-inflammatory pathways it uses to support blood sugar health. So if it is a coincidence, it is a very convenient one. He does work that way sometimes. Now, here is what I want you to understand about these three foods taken together, because individually they are each valuable, but together they form something more than the sum of their parts. The eggs establish a stable blood sugar baseline by providing protein and fat with no carbohydrate. The apple cider vinegar improves your cell's ability to respond to insulin and slows carbohydrate digestion for everything that follows. The walnuts reduce inflammation and add another layer of blood sugar protection while providing additional fat and protein that extend satiety. Together, these three foods create a morning metabolic environment in which your blood sugar system can function the way the Lord designed it to function, steadily, efficiently, and without crisis. And that environment established every morning compounds over time. One morning of stable blood sugar is a good morning. 1,000 mornings of stable blood sugar, repeated across years and decades, is a fundamentally different trajectory for your health than 1,000 mornings of spikes and crashes. I have had approximately 37,000 mornings since I became a woman making my own food choices. I have started nearly every one of them with these three foods, or some version of them, and I am diabetes-free at 102. That is the evidence, not a study. Not a journal, not a clinical trial with a sample size of 300 people followed for 2 years. 102 years of a real human body, managed with real food, producing a real result. But I want to close with something that goes deeper than blood sugar, because blood sugar matters and these foods matter and you should eat them. But they are not the whole story of why I am well. I wake up every morning and before I do anything else I acknowledge the day. I thank the Lord for another one, not in a complicated way. Just a quiet acknowledgement that I'm still here and the day is being given to me and I intend to use it for something worthy of the gift. That gratitude, that settled, quiet starting place, does something physiological that the vinegar cannot do alone. It calms the body's alarm system before the day has a chance to activate it. It tells your cells that this is a safe morning, that you are not under threat, that the systems can run normally rather than in emergency mode. A body that wakes up in peace metabolizes its breakfast differently than a body that wakes up in anxiety. That is not poetry. That is biology. And 102 years of waking up in gratitude, starting the morning with intention and eating food that cooperates with the body God gave me. That combination is what diabetes-free at 102 actually looks like from the inside. Start tomorrow morning differently. Put the cereal box down. Make your eggs. Drink your vinegar water. Eat your walnuts. Say thank you for the morning before you do any of it. Then go live the day well. That is the whole prescription. And it does not cost a thing. All right. My eggs are waiting and they are patient, but not infinitely so.